welcome to my channel. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and like. The Nevada desert lay silent under a night sky, stars twinkling like unspoken secrets waiting for someone bold enough to listen. A pale moonlight draped the sand in silver, highlighting a covert research station buried deep underground, a slab of steel and glass, cold and unremarkable, perfect for hiding something not of Earth. Kalen stood before a vast window, his pale purple eyes reflecting the dim glow, faint luminescent veins pulsing beneath his skin, a mark of the Varyth species concealed under a cloak mimicking human flesh. To humans, he was an odd scientist, black hair with a silver sheen, a voice deep as stone, a gaze that sent shivers. But Kalen didn't belong to this planet. He came with a mission, to harvest life traces from humans, the only energy that could save the Varyth from extinction. He slid his hand over a hidden control panel, the screen flaring with Varyth script, swirling symbols alien to Earth. Biological data, energy frequencies, matched probabilities. Kalen's lips tightened, his eyes narrowing. 13 prior subjects had failed, none meeting the standard. The Varyth Council was impatient, and his time was running out. His heart, a dual-muscled organ unique to Varyth, beat steadily, yet a ripple of unease coursed through him, as if the universe whispered a warning. The metal door hissed open. Subject 14 is here. His assistant, a lanky boy with glasses sliding down his nose, said quickly. Name's Jane Harper. Kalen nodded, eyes fixed on the screen. I'll handle it. The assistant scurried off, leaving the room in silence, save for the faint hum of machinery. Then she walked in. Jane Harper was tall, her denim jacket frayed at the shoulders, brown hair tied high, a half-smirk playing on her lips as if the world were a joke she'd already figured out. Her sharp eyes scanned the room before locking onto Kalen, sizing him up. This the place that pays $600 for a few blood tests, right? She asked, her tone teasing, hands in her pockets, gaze defiant. Kalen turned, his stare cutting like a blade, but for a fleeting moment, his heart skipped a beat. She wasn't like the others, no fear, no apathy. She stood there, confident, vibrant, a spark in the station's cold darkness. If you want to call saving your life a blood test, go ahead, Ms. Harper. Kalen replied, his voice low and icy, striving to keep his distance. He gestured to the examination chair, a metallic device with sensors blinking like the eyes of a living creature. Jane shrugged, strolling over with the ease of someone unaware they stood on a precipice. Just call me Jane, she said, sitting down, legs crossed. You a doctor, or just playing one to scam my cash? Kalen didn't smile. I'm Kalen. And I don't need your money. He activated the scanner, a pulse of blue light sweeping over Jane's body, emitting a soft hum. Data flashed on his hidden interface. Heart rate 68, blood pressure stable, adrenaline low. Then the final line appeared, blazing red. Life trace, perfect match. His heart pounded, uncontainable. She was the one they needed, the energy source the Varyth Council had hunted for centuries. But as he met Jane's eyes, he saw a spark no machine could measure, as if she were a variable he hadn't accounted for. You know, Jane said, leaning back in the chair, her voice light but laced with intent. You're looking at me like I'm the answer to some cosmic equation. Or like I owe you money. She raised an eyebrow, her smirk a challenge. Kalen pursed his lips, hiding his turmoil. Maybe you're right, he said evenly, but his hand tightened on the device, as if to anchor himself. He turned back to the panel, inputting commands for a deeper scan. The blue light shifted to purple, enveloping Jane like a thin veil, accentuating her form in the dark. Jane tilted her head, watching him. This place looks like a B-movie horror set. Just missing a monster jumping out of a closet. Kalen paused, fingers hovering over the controls. He wasn't used to this ease, the way she spoke as if danger didn't faze her. I study, he said, voice cold. Humans. How you persist. Jane let out a soft laugh, the sound a lone note in the sterile room. Persist? You mean how we pay bills, chug coffee, pretend life makes sense? She looked at him, her gaze sharper than he expected. What about you, Kalen? How do you persist in this godforsaken desert? Her question struck like a knife, piercing something Kalen had buried. He didn't answer, just pressed a button. The device hummed louder, the purple light flaring, and Jane winced, shivering slightly as the sensors grazed her skin. Whoa, that's freaky, she said, her tone still playful, but her eyes flicked to Kalen, searching for a crack in his armor. Not gonna hurt, right? I didn't sign up to be a lab rat. No pain, Kalen said, his voice low, almost a whisper. He stepped closer, checking the data. Jane's breathing was steady, but he felt her warmth, something Varyth tech couldn't quantify. He stepped back, trying to maintain distance, but her gaze followed, as if she glimpsed something he didn't want seeing. You should rest after this, he said, shutting off the device. The purple light faded, leaving the room in dim shadows. Jane sat up, brushing her hair back, her smirk returning. Rest? I've got a ton to do, and these $600 won't spend themselves. She stood, nearly as tall as him, her eyes unwavering. But I'll be back, Kalen. Something about you makes me curious. Kalen didn't respond, only nodded, but as she left, her footsteps echoing down the hall, a strange wave surged in his chest. Not the mission, not the data, something alive, dangerous, and utterly human. He gazed out at the desert, where stars still shimmered, and wondered if he just found his species' salvation, or a threat that would change everything. That night, the Nevada desert sank into darkness, the wind whistling through rocks as if Earth itself whispered a warning. In the observation room of the research station, a blue hologram flickered, casting light on Kalen's face, his pale purple eyes cold, yet his gaze wavered, as if he stood at an unnamed crossroads. He sat alone, clutching a small vial, a faint golden glow swirling inside like a captive star. This was the first sample from Jane Harper, Subject 14, the perfect life trace the Varyth had sought for centuries. But as he stared at the vial, a strange weight settled over him, as if he held something that wasn't his to take. The hologram flared, and Vren, High Counselor of the Varyth, appeared. His angular face was sharp, gray eyes devoid of warmth, like a machine forged from cold metal. Progress? Vren's voice cut like a blade. Kalen lifted the vial, its golden light reflecting on his face. First sample pure. Subject 14 is the perfect source. He kept his tone even, but his dual heart pounded, betraying the calm he feigned. Vren nodded, his gaze piercing. Good. Proceed. The Council tolerates no delays. Failure means our species' end. The hologram vanished, leaving Kalen in darkness, the vial's golden glow a faint reminder of his duty. He set the vial down, fingers brushing its cold surface. Jane Harper. Her name echoed unbidden in his mind, paired with her half-smirk and mischievous eyes. Why were humans so complex? They were meant to be mere energy sources, chaotic, predictable, controllable. But Jane was none of those. She was a variable, a question, and Kalen wasn't sure he wanted the answer. In the lab, faint purple light bathed the examination chair where Jane lay, her body relaxed but her eyes sharp. This feels like an alien spa, she quipped, her voice light but trembling slightly as the neural stimulator activated. Kalen stood at the control panel, adjusting the energy flow, his gaze deliberately avoiding her. But as the screen displayed Jane's heartbeat, small, steady ripples, his eyes inadvertently drifted to her chest, where the purple light highlighted soft curves. He froze, turning away, his dual heart skipping a beat. This wasn't science. This was something he wasn't trained to comprehend. You okay, Kalen? Jane asked, her tone teasing, as if she'd caught him off guard. You look like you saw a ghost. Kalen didn't reply, just pressed a button to amplify the energy flow. The second vial began to fill, its golden light brighter, as if Jane's very soul were being drawn out. A tightness gripped his chest, not data, not duty, but a foreign sensation, as if he were doing something wrong. I'm okay, right? Jane asked, sitting up as the device stopped, her brown hair tousled, her eyes gleaming as if fear didn't touch her. More than okay, Kalen said, his voice quieter than usual, almost a whisper. He turned away, hiding the sudden smile sparked by her jest. Jane stood brushing her hair back, her smirk curling. You know, Kaelin, you make me feel more important than usual. Like I'm the key to some cosmic secret. She tilted her head, her gaze probing. Am I right? Kaelin stiffened, his hand tightening on the vial. You think too much, he replied, voice cold, but his eyes met hers, and for a moment, he saw something, a spark, an invitation, or a threat. Jane just laughed, shrugged, and walked out, leaving him with a strange emptiness. He watched her silhouette fade beyond the metal door, and for the first time, he questioned if his mission was truly just. That night, Kaelin stood on the station's roof, the desert wind biting through his cloak. The star-filled sky stretched wide, their pinpricks of light like eyes watching him, either judging nor forgiving. He tried to erase Jane from his mind, her smile, her silly quips, her gaze that pierced his facade. Humans shouldn't be more than energy sources. They shouldn't unsettle him. But Jane Harper, with her effortless vitality, made him doubt everything he'd been taught. His wrist communicator buzzed, shattering the silence. Vren's hologram reappeared, his face stone-hard. The second sample? Kaelin nodded, lifting the second vial, its golden light blazing in the dark. Complete. But, he faltered, his voice catching. Vren growled, eyes flashing. But what? Kaelin shook his head, steadying his tone. Nothing. I'll secure the final sample. The hologram vanished, leaving him with the wind and stars. He looked down at the desert, where the faint lights of a small town flickered, weak but resilient, like humanity itself. Kaelin gripped the vial, its golden glow illuminating his face, and for the first time, he wondered if he could betray his species. Not for Jane, or so he told himself, but for something greater, something he hadn't yet dared to name. He turned back, stepping into the station's darkness, but Jane's image clung to him, a light he couldn't extinguish. The next morning, the Nevada desert blazed under the sun, banishing the night's shadows, but doubt clung to Kaelin like sand trapped beneath skin. He stood in the lab, the faint purple glow from the examination chair casting light on his face, his pale purple eyes lingering on the glowing golden vial. Jane Harper. Her name echoed uninvited in his mind, paired with her half-smirk and piercing gaze. He clenched his fist, trying to shake the sense that she was more than a subject, a secret he wasn't ready to face. Day 3, the Nevada desert burned, but the underground lab remained cold as ice. Jane Harper strode in, a bag of cookies in hand, her half-smirk shining like a stray sunbeam. Hey, I figured we should snack before you drain all my life force, she said, setting the bag on the metal table, her tone teasing but her eyes sharp, as if testing Kaelin's reaction. He looked up from the control panel, his pale purple eyes flashing, caught off guard by her ease. Jane wasn't like the others, no timidity, no suspicion. She stood there, denim jacket frayed at the shoulders, brown hair tied high, as if this room were just a pit stop in her vibrant life. You're always like this? Kaelin asked, his voice low, but a rare small smile flickered across his lips, surprising even himself. Jane winked, sitting beside the table. You mean naturally charming? Damn right. She opened the bag, sliding it toward him. Try one. Not poisoned, I swear. Kaelin hesitated, then took a cookie, biting into it. The sweet, alien taste spread across his tongue, something Varyth tech could never replicate. They sat there, munching cookies, talking about trivial things, the superhero movie she loved, how the desert glowed at dawn like a painting no one noticed. But when Jane tilted her head, her eyes gleaming, she asked, Where are you really from? Kaelin froze. The air between them grew heavy, as if she touched a secret not meant to be disturbed. Far away, he replied, his gaze dodging hers, drifting to the dark screen. Jane didn't press, just nodded, her smile fading but not gone. Everyone's got secrets, right? She stood clapping her hands as if to dispel the tension. Come on, let's get this done so I can go home and binge movies. Kaelin nodded, but in his chest, his dual heart pounded, as if warning him of something he wasn't ready to face. The experiment began. Jane lay on the examination chair, faint purple light enveloping her, highlighting her form in the dark. Kalen stood at the control panel, adjusting the energy flow, but his eyes didn't stray from her. Jane's heartbeat appeared on the screen, steady, strong, like an unbreakable melody. He pressed a button to activate the sensors, but his finger paused, hovering over the controls. A question surged unbidden. "Jane," he said softly, almost a whisper, "if you knew the truth, would you hate me?" Jane opened her eyes, her gaze surprised but fearless. "What truth?" She sat up, hair tousled, eyes probing. Kalen didn't answer, just stared, his heart pounding as if it might break free. He wanted to tell her about the mission, the life traces, how she was the key to his species' survival. But before he could speak, a distant explosion shook the room. The screen flashed red, a warning blaring. Unidentified ship approaching. Kalen shot up, face pale. Vren had suspected him. They'd come early. "Run!" he shouted, yanking Jane from the chair. She didn't question, just followed, her steps swift as a warrior's. They raced through the corridors, lights flickering, alarms wailing like a wounded beast. Kalen slammed his hand on a hidden panel, opening a secret passage to the hangar. "You owe me an explanation," Jane said, panting, but her eyes remained sharp, as if danger were an old friend. "After we survive," Kalen replied, his voice firm but his glance at her laced with worry. In the hangar, a sleek Varyth ship waited, gleaming like a jewel in the dark. They leaped aboard, Kalen diving into the pilot's seat, hands flying over the controls with machine-like precision. But before he could start the engines, Jane grabbed his hand, firm and steady. "Kalen, whoever you are, I trust you," she said, her eyes blazing, as if betting the world on him. Kalen stared, his vision blurring, his dual heart racing. "You shouldn't," he whispered, but his hand tightened around hers, as if letting go would lose her forever. The ship roared to life, blasting through the desert rock, the engines growled, drowning all sound. Behind them, 3 Varyth warships pursued, their weapons' red glow blazing like blood. Kalen weaved through canyons, hands steady but heart chaotic. Jane sat beside him, eyes scanning the radar. "What do they want?" she asked, her voice calm but sharp as a blade. Kalen bit his lip, knowing he could hide no longer. "They want you. And I helped them." He told her everything, the mission to harvest life traces, the Varyth's extinction, how Jane was the perfect source to save his species. Jane fell silent, her face hardening, her eyes darkening. "So what am I?" she asked, her voice low, almost a whisper. "A battery?" Kalen shook his head, his gaze pained. "You're the reason I want to change." He stressed each word, as if pleading for her to understand. Jane stared, saying nothing, but her eyes cut like a knife through his cold facade. The ship shuddered as an energy blast grazed it, shattering a nearby rock. Kalen gritted his teeth, banking through a narrow canyon, the pursuing ship's red lights illuminating the sky. Jane gripped her seat, but her voice stayed steady. "If we survive, you owe me a longer story," she said, a faint smile returning, as if daring the universe itself. Kalen didn't reply, but inside, he knew she changed everything, and there was no going back. The desert sky blazed red as the Varyth mothership loomed, a colossal metal nightmare hovering, blotting out the stars. Nevada's canyons trembled under the roar of engines, and Kalen's ship shuddered violently, locked in the enemy's sights. Jane gripped her seat, her sharp eyes scanning the radar where 3 Varyth warships clung close, their weapons' red glow spilling like blood in the dark. Kalen gritted his teeth, banking the ship through a narrow canyon, but he knew they couldn't run forever. The mothership was the endgame, an impregnable fortress carrying the Varyth Council's judgment. A hologram flared before Kalen, and Vren appeared, his angular face cold as metal, gray eyes flashing contempt. "Kalen, you betray us for a human?" His voice sliced like a knife, each word a cut. Kalen stood tall, his pale purple eyes meeting Vren's without flinching. "I betrayed a flawed plan," he said, voice low but unyielding. "She's not a tool." Jane glanced at him, a flicker of surprise in her eyes, but she said nothing, only tightened her grip on the seat, bracing for the worst. Vren's laugh was cold, brittle as cracking stone. "You'll die with her." The hologram blinked out, and the control screen flashed red, a countdown ticking. 20 seconds to missile launch. Jane frowned, her voice calm but sharp. "Got any ideas, Kalen? 'Cause I'm not dying in this tin can." He didn't answer, just lunged to the storage bay, prying open a hidden panel. Inside gleamed a small, jewel-like device holding the Varyth memory, the Council's full plan, from harvesting life traces to dominating Earth. "If we send this to Earth," Kalen said, voice low, "humanity will know the truth." Jane nodded, her eyes igniting. "Do it." They moved as one, Kalen inputting activation codes, Jane checking satellite signals. Their fingers danced across the controls, swift and precise, as if they'd been a team for a lifetime. The signal launched, an invisible data stream soaring through space toward Earth's satellite network. But time didn't wait. The countdown hit 10 seconds. Kalen clenched his jaw, slamming the button to self-destruct the ship's energy core. "Hold on," he shouted, and Jane grabbed his arm, her gaze unwavering. The ship hurtled toward the mothership, engines roaring like an enraged beast. An electromagnetic explosion erupted from the core, a blinding blue flash crippling the mothership's shields. Their ship bucked wildly, metal screaming as if tearing apart, but Kalen kept it together, weaving through a gap in the debris. Behind them, the mothership wobbled, its weapon's red glow fading. Jane gasped, a faint smile breaking through. "That was your plan? Kamikaze into death?" Kalen didn't smile, eyes glued to the controls. "Alive is enough." He piloted the ship downward, crash landing in an Arizona wasteland, dust billowing as the craft hit the ground, trailing black smoke. Jane coughed, staggering to her feet, eyeing Kalen. "Did we win?" He offered a weak smile, the first hint of relief. "Not yet. But we're alive." They stepped from the ship, the desert air biting, pale moonlight illuminating their weary faces. Jane propped her hands on her hips, eyeing the wreckage. "Remind me never to vacation with you again," she teased, but her gaze softened on Kalen. He opened his mouth to reply, but a figure emerged from the shadows, steps slow and menacing. A human agent in a black suit, gun glinting under the moon. "Jane Harper," he said, voice cold as steel. "You're under arrest for treason." Kalen tensed, fists clenching, ready to act. Jane raised an eyebrow, her smirk unshaken. "Treason? You need a dictionary, pal." The agent didn't smile, raising his gun higher. "You collaborated with this." He jabbed a finger at Kalen. "An alien spy. We've been watching the station for months." Kalen stepped forward, his pale purple eyes flashing, voice low but sharp. "She knows nothing. Let her go." Jane shot Kalen a glance, a flicker of gratitude, but she turned back to the agent, voice steady. "Listen, we just sent data to the world exposing an alien plot. Want to arrest someone, go get them." The agent sneered, doubt in his eyes. "What data?" Kalen answered, voice icy. "Check the satellite network. The truth's out there." But before they could negotiate, a distant engine roared. Red light swept the field, and another Varyth ship appeared, smaller but deadly, hovering above. Jane grabbed Kalen's hand, voice low. "Friends of yours?" Kalen shook his head, his dual heart pounding. "No. Enemies." The agent stepped back, eyes darting between them and the ship, as if realizing the situation was beyond him. "Consider yourself lucky, Harper," he said, then bolted into the dark, leaving them to face the new threat. Kalen pulled Jane toward the wrecked ship, ducking behind debris. "They don't forgive traitors," he whispered, eyes fixed on the Varyth craft. Jane smirked, though her breath was heavy. "Then we'll have to disappoint them." She looked at him, eyes blazing, as if danger were just a game she hadn't won yet. Kalen didn't reply, but inside he knew she was why he fought, not for Varyth, not for the mission, but for something greater, a light he refused to let fade. The Arizona wasteland lay shrouded in darkness, moonlight casting pale glows on the wrecked ship, black smoke curling like specters. Jane stood tall, breath steady despite her racing heart, eyes locked on the agent before her. He wore a black suit, gun gleaming, face hard as stone. "Jane Harper," he said, voice cold. "You sold military data to this." He pointed at Kaelin, eyes dripping disdain. "An alien spy." Jane laughed, the sound a defiant spark in the tense air. "You need to brush up on spy," she said, voice sharp but heart pounding. "I'm just trying to survive." Kaelin raised a hand, his pale purple eyes calm but keen, like a blade ready to draw. "She knows nothing about me," he said, voice low. "Let her go." The agent, calling himself Agent Carver, sneered, gun steady on Jane. "Shut it, invader." He stepped closer, eyes gleaming with the confidence of a man in control, unaware of who he faced. Before Kaelin could react, Jane moved like lightning. A former freestyle fighter, her reflexes were razor-sharp, and in one fluid motion, she spun, disarming Carver and snatching his gun. He stumbled, eyes wide with shock. Jane aimed at him, her half-smirk unwavering. "Listen," she said, voice calm but steely. "We just saved this planet. Want the truth? Check the data we sent." Carver backed up, doubt flickering in his eyes. "What data?" Kaelin stepped forward, gaze unwavering. "The Varyth memory," he said, voice cold. "The Council's full plan, harvesting life traces, controlling Earth. It's on the satellite network, waiting for your kind to read." Carver frowned, fist tightening, as if weighing Kaelin's words. Jane tilted her head, gun steady. "You'd better start running, 'cause when that data goes public, your government's gonna have more questions than bullets." But before Carver could reply, an explosion shook the ground. Red light swept the field, and a Varyth ship landed, smaller than the mothership but lethal, gleaming like a predator. A tall, gaunt figure stepped out, eyes burning red like smoldering coals. Lyra, Kaelin's former colleague, and more, a scar from a past he tried to bury. "Kaelin," Lyra said, her voice sweet but deadly, a velvet-wrapped blade. "You think you can destroy the Council's plan alone?" Jane shot Kaelin a look, her gaze icy, as if stabbed in the back. "Who's she?" she asked, voice low, gun still on Carver but eyes on Kaelin. He clenched his jaw, dual heart racing. "An old mistake," he said, voice hard, eyes fixed on Lyra. She laughed, the sound sharp as shattering glass, ordering her Varyth soldiers in gleaming armor to surround them. "You were always weak, Kaelin," Lyra said, advancing, her red eyes flashing. "But choosing a human? Pathetic." Carver, sensing the situation spiraling, signaled his team to retreat. "This isn't our fight," he said coldly, vanishing into the dark with his men, leaving Jane and Kaelin to face Lyra and her Varyth squad. Jane smirked, eyes alight like a warrior ready for battle. "Guess the party's not over," she said, voice teasing but grip tight on the gun. Kaelin glanced at her, a flicker of gratitude in his eyes, but there was no time for words. Lyra raised a hand, signaling her soldiers to advance. "Take them. Alive." But Kaelin was faster. He dove to the ship's wreckage, activating a hidden emergency device in the twisted metal. A smoke explosion erupted, cloaking the field in thick fog. "Run!" he shouted, grabbing Jane's hand, pulling her into the desert. Varyth gunfire echoed behind, red beams piercing the smoke, but Jane ran swift, her steps light as a panther's. "She's your ex?" she asked, panting, voice half angry, half teasing. "Your timing and girlfriend sucks." Kaelin didn't answer, just tightened his grip, guiding her through jagged rocks. They ducked behind a ridge, the smoke thinning, Varyth soldiers' voices closing in. Kaelin looked at Jane, eyes pained but resolute. "Lyra betrayed me when I rejected the Council's plan," he whispered. "She craved power, not survival." Jane raised an eyebrow, her faint smile returning. "Sounds like a bad movie. But if she wants to play, I'll give her a fight." Red light swept the ridge, and Kaelin pulled Jane low, their breaths mingling in the cold air. "You don't have to do this," he said, voice low. "You could run." Jane met his gaze, eyes blazing. "Run? Not my style." She squeezed his hand, firm and sure. We face this together, Kaelin. Whoever that red-eyed bitch is. Kaelin didn't reply, but inside he knew she was why he couldn't turn back. A vibrant, unyielding light he'd do anything to keep burning. Under a veil of smoke cloaking the Arizona wasteland, Kaelin dragged Jane through jagged rocks, Varyth gunfire ringing behind like a death knell. They slipped into a narrow canyon, dust coating their clothes, panting breaths blending in the cold air. Red light from Lyra's ship swept past, nearly spotting them, but Kaelin found a small cave hidden behind dry thorns. They squeezed inside, darkness swallowing them, only faint moonlight filtering through a crack, just enough to catch Jane's sharp eyes, still burning despite the danger closing in. The cave was frigid, moonlight casting silver streaks across Jane's face, highlighting her piercing gaze. She leaned against the rock wall, breath ragged but steady, clutching the gun stolen from Carver. Kaelin sat opposite, his pale purple eyes distant, as if staring into a past he longed to forget. The desert outside was quiet, but the calm was a lie. Lyra and her Varyth soldiers were hunting, and time was no ally. Jane smirked, her voice teasing but edged. You owe me the full story on that red-eyed chick. Kaelin sighed, his gaze drifting to the crack where stars flickered, reminders of the mission he'd betrayed. Lyra and I once studied life traces together, he said, voice low. I thought she believed in saving our species. But she chose power over ethics. When I opposed the plan, she turned me over to the council. Jane tilted her head, her faint smile unwavering, eyes locked on him. Sounds like a shitty movie. She's the villain type, huh? Kaelin didn't laugh, just nodded, his eyes pained. She was an ally. Not anymore. Jane opened her mouth to press further, but Kaelin's wrist communicator buzzed, shattering the silence. A message from Vren flashed, cold and sharp. You triggered the emergency code. Lyra reports you're a traitor. The mission is compromised. Respond now. Kaelin glanced at Jane, his dual heart pounding. If I don't reply, they'll send assassins. Jane frowned, her eyes sparking like a strategist's. Then reply. But lie. Kaelin nodded, fingers flying over the device, sending a false message. Still hunting Harper. Final sample will be delivered. He hit send, eyes tense, but Jane nodded, as if betting her life on his loyalty. Then Jane's old phone, tucked in her jacket, buzzed. She pulled it out, the screen glowing with a message from an unknown number. Jane, don't trust the alien. He's the mastermind. Jane froze, her eyes darkening, as if stabbed in the back. She turned to Kaelin, voice low, sharp as a blade. Explain. Kaelin shook his head, eyes frantic, almost panicked. I don't know who sent that, he said, voice urgent. I swear, Jane, I'm not the mastermind. I designed the system, but when I saw it would destroy humanity, I opposed it. They exiled me here for that. He stepped closer, hands raised as if to reach for her, but Jane stepped back, eyes brimming with doubt. I need time to think, she said, voice cold, clutching the phone like it was her only clue. The air between them grew heavy, a taut thread ready to snap. But before they could resolve it, red light swept the cave, paired with the roar of Varyth engines. Lyra had found them. Kaelin grabbed Jane's hand, pulling her from the cave. Run! He shouted, and they bolted through the desert, dust rising underfoot. Red light from Lyra's ship lit the sky, a giant eye hunting its prey. They spotted an abandoned checkpoint, a dusty jeep sitting silent. Jane leaped into the driver's seat, starting it in seconds, the engine roaring. Kaelin slid in beside her, pulling a Varyth weapon, a small gun pulsing green light, gleaming like a deadly gem. You know how to drive this? He asked, voice tight as Jane floored it, the jeep tearing down the dirt road. Good question, she shot back, her defiant smile returning, though her eyes held a trace of doubt. Lyra's ship fired from above, red energy bolts slamming the ground, kicking up explosive sand. Jane swerved through a dangerous curve, tires screeching, nearly flipping. You drive like a demon! Kaelin yelled, clinging to his seat, firing back. A green beam from his weapon hit Lyra's ship's wing, making it wobble. Jane laughed, her voice cutting through the blasts. Thanks. Best compliment all day. The jeep roared through a narrow canyon, rock fragments raining as Lyra's ship bombarded them. Kaelin glanced at Jane, eyes tinged with pain. Jane, about the message, I didn't lie, he said, voice hoarse, barely audible over the engine. She didn't look at him, just gripped the wheel tighter. If you're lying, Kaelin, I'll snap your neck myself. But she floored the gas harder, as if betting her life on a fragile hope. An energy bolt grazed the jeep, shattering the side mirror. Kaelin gritted his teeth, firing another shot, forcing Lyra's ship to pull back. Jane banked over a ridge, dust cloaking them briefly. We need a plan, she said, voice firm. I'm not running forever. Kaelin nodded, eyes alight. There's an old comm station ahead. If we reach it, we can resend the Varyth data. Jane glanced at him, her gaze still cold but flickering with trust. Fine. But if red ice catches us, you're explaining a lot more. They tore into the dark, the jeep roaring, stars above silent witnesses. Despite the weight of doubt, Jane and Kaelin moved as a team, each the other's light in the storm. And Kaelin knew, no matter if Lyra or Vren pursued, he wouldn't let that light go out. The Arizona desert lay still under the moonlight, silver beams glinting off the motionless jeep, its engine silent as the fuel ran dry. Dust hung in the air, a trace of their escape from Lyra. Jane stood beside the vehicle, hands on hips, her sharp eyes locked on Kaelin, as if she could pierce every secret he hid. He sat on a rock, pale purple eyes reflecting the moon, his face weary but unflinching. The air between them was heavy, the mysterious message on Jane's old phone dangling like a blade. Tell me the truth, Jane said, her voice low and sharp, each word a bullet. Was that message right? Are you behind it all? Kaelin met her gaze, unblinking, his dual heart pounding but his voice steady. I was part of the plan, Jane. I designed the system to harvest life traces. But when I saw it would destroy humanity, I opposed it. They exiled me to Earth as punishment, but I turned it into a chance to make things right. He paused, his eyes pained but sincere, as if laying his soul bare before her. Jane stayed silent, her gaze probing, weighing every word. Then she nodded, a faint smile breaking through, though her eyes remained sharp. All right. I believe you. But if you're lying, I'll snap your neck myself. Kaelin gave a weak smile, the first hint of relief. I know you could. Jane stepped forward, clapping his shoulder, a brief gesture that bridged the gap. Good. Now let's get out of this damn desert. They decided to find a covert Earth comms station a few miles away, where they could resend the Varyth memory to warn the world. Under the moonlight, they trekked through the desert, their steps quiet but in sync, like a team seasoned by danger. Jane shared a story of beating a drunk in a bare-knuckle fight, her voice wry, and Kaelin listened, a smile flickering in his eyes. But when they reached the comm station, a low concrete block tucked in the shadows of rocks, the main door was smashed, wires scorched, screens shattered. Jane gritted her teeth. Someone got here first. Kaelin knelt, inspecting the traces, his eyes darkening. Not Varyth. Humans. Before they could speculate further, a sound echoed from the dark. Agent Carver stepped out, his black suit gleaming under the moon, leading a team of mercenaries in armored gear, weapons flashing. Harper, he said, voice cold as steel. Hand over the alien and the data, or die. Jane smirked, her eyes blazing like a warrior's. I choose option 3, kick your ass. The fight erupted. Jane lunged, swift as a panther, her fist slamming into a mercenary's face, dropping him. She spun, kicking another's knee, snatching his gun in one fluid move. Kaelin activated a small Varyth device on his wrist, conjuring a green energy shield that blocked a hail of bullets. He raised the Varyth gun, firing green beams, downing 2 enemies in a flash. You okay? He shouted, his eyes darting to Jane through the smoke. Better than you think. Jane shot back, her defiant smile shining, landing a punch to a mercenary's jaw, knocking him out. They moved in sync, a machine built for survival. Kalen's shield repelled a group of mercenaries, giving Jane a chance to leap over a rock, shooting two from afar. But Carver was no pushover. He retreated, holding a strange device, a silver gleaming copy of the Varyth memory. "Thanks for the data," he sneered. "My organization will use it better than you." Kalen froze, realizing their mistake. Carver had stolen the copy while they were distracted. Jane gritted her teeth, firing at Carver, but he dodged, vanishing into the dark with his remaining men. Jane surged forward, ready to chase, but Kalen grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "Too late," he said, voice taut. "He's gone." Jane spun, eyes ablaze. "He's got the data." "What does that mean?" Kalen sighed, his eyes pained. "He works for a covert Earth organization. They want Varyth tech to dominate the planet. If they decode the data, everything we've done is for nothing." Jane clenched her fists, eyes burning. "Then we find him. And take it back." Kalen nodded, a spark of admiration in his gaze. "You never give up, do you?" "Not my style," Jane said, her smile returning though weary. They turned back to the desert, moonlight casting their shadows, two small but unyielding figures. Though Carver had escaped and the data was in enemy hands, Kalen knew they still had a chance, because Jane Harper, with her relentless spirit, was the light he'd follow to the end. They walked on, toward the horizon, where stars still shimmered, a promise that the fight wasn't over. After a grueling night crossing the Arizona desert, dust caking their clothes, Kalen and Jane reached their wrecked ship, lying silent in the wasteland, pale moonlight glinting off twisted metal. They worked tirelessly, Kalen's hands dancing over scorched controls, patching the energy core with Varyth tools, while Jane checked satellite signals, her eyes blazing with resolve. "Carver and Lyra won't wait," she said, voice firm, as if daring the universe. The ship shuddered, engines roaring back to life, ready to leap into space, where their fate would be sealed. The black void of space enveloped Kalen and Jane's patched ship, stars twinkling like silent eyes witnessing their final stand. The vessel, hastily repaired in the Arizona wasteland, shook violently as it climbed into orbit, engines growling like a dying beast. Jane sat at the auxiliary controls, her sharp eyes scanning the radar, while Kalen piloted, hands steady but dual heart racing. Their mission was simple yet impossible: transmit the Varyth memory to an international satellite, exposing the Council's plot before Carver or Lyra turned it into a weapon. But space was unforgiving, and their enemies were waiting. A red flash swept the screen, and the Varyth mothership loomed, massive and deadly, hovering like an invincible fortress. Beside it, a small human fleet, sleek warships bearing the mark of a covert military group, moved in sync with Lyra's ship. Kalen gritted his teeth, his pale purple eyes darkening. "They're working together," he said, voice low, almost disbelieving. Jane frowned, anger flashing in her eyes. "Lyra and Carver? Red Ice in the suit? Great, a match made in hell." A hologram flared, and Lyra appeared, her burning red eyes gleaming, a cold smile on her lips. "Kalen, you can't run forever," she said, her voice sweet but sharp as a blade. Beside her stood Carver, his black suit glinting in the hologram's light, eyes smug with power. "Harper," he said, "you picked the wrong side. The life traces will be the ultimate bioweapon, controlling both Varyth and humans. Hand over the data or die." Jane laughed, the sound a defiant spark in the cold void. "Bioweapon? You've watched too many sci-fi flicks." But her eyes darkened as she glanced at Kalen, grasping the scale of this alliance. Kalen shook his head, voice tense. "We can't fight them both." The mothership raised its weapons, red lights pulsing, while Carver's fleet locked on, missiles primed. Jane grabbed Kalen's hand, firm and sure, her eyes blazing like an unquenchable flame. "Then don't fight," she said, voice low but resolute. "Destroy." Kalen looked at her, his dual heart pounding, and in that moment, he saw not just a human, but the reason he'd risk everything. He nodded, eyes resolute. "Destroy." They moved fast. Kalen punched codes into the controls, aiming the ship at the mothership's energy core, the heart of the plot, where the data was stored. Jane activated the satellite signal, transmitting the Varyth memory to Earth, paired with a message she recorded on the fly. "We are human! We don't surrender!" Her voice rang over the radio, fierce and unyielding, a declaration to the cosmos. The signal went out, but time was short. The mothership aimed its cannons, and Carver's fleet fired missiles, red light illuminating the void. Kalen hit the button to prime the ship's energy core, programmed to detonate on impact. "Hold on!" he shouted, and Jane gripped his hand, a faint smile breaking through as the ship caught fire. "If this is the end, at least I'm with you," she said, eyes bright as stars. Kalen pulled her close, whispering over the engine's roar. "You're the light I never want to lose." Jane laughed, eyes blazing. "Then keep it burning, Kalen." The ship slammed into the mothership, metal crashing against metal, sparks erupting like a storm of light. The explosion from their ship's core ignited, a blinding fireball engulfing the mothership's heart, obliterating the data and Lyra and Carver's plot. Carver's fleet wobbled, pushed back by the shockwave, their weapons' red glow fading. Space quaked, and in that final moment, Jane and Kalen held each other, two lights merged in the endless dark. On Earth, the Varyth data spread through satellite networks, reaching scientists, governments, and ordinary people. Jane's message echoed, looping on every frequency. "We are human! We don't surrender!" It became a spark, igniting hope, rallying humanity to unite against cosmic threats. Though no one knew if Kalen and Jane survived, their story, of courage, defiance, and a bond beyond species, became legend. In the void, the mothership's debris drifted, glinting under starlight. And somewhere, a small, faint but resilient spark, like a light that never fades, still burned in the emptiness. 3 months later, the Nevada sky shone brighter than ever, stars twinkling like kept promises. At a newly built diplomatic center on the city's outskirts, dawn's light streamed through vast windows, glinting off Jane Harper's brown hair. She stood in a security advisor's uniform, a silver badge gleaming on her shoulder, her eyes bright but carrying the weariness of someone who'd walked the edge of death. Beside her, Kalen, in a simple white cloak, gazed at the sprawling city below, gleaming buildings, bustling streets, a world transformed by their actions. They had survived, rescued at the last second by a rogue Varyth ship, rebels who also sought to topple the council. But the memory of the explosion, of thinking they'd lose each other, still haunted them. Jane tilted her head, her eyes sliding to Kalen, her familiar half-smirk surfacing. "The Varyth Council's done," she said, voice soft but firm. "Your data exposed everything. Carver's locked up in a secret base in Montana. Lyra vanished." Kalen nodded, his pale purple eyes shadowed, as if peering into an uncertain future. "She'll be back," he said, voice low. "Lyra doesn't quit. But this time we're ready." Jane turned to him, eyes sparking with mischief. "We? You're really staying on Earth?" She leaned in, her shoulder brushing his, testing his reaction. Kalen took her hand, warm and firm, his gaze softening, free of the Varyth's cold mask for the first time. "I came to take something," he said, voice low, almost a whisper. "But you gave me a whole world." Jane chuckled, her fingers lacing tightly with his, as if unwilling to let go. "Careful, Kalen. Earth's messy, but it's got a way of hooking you." They stood there, watching the city wake under the sun. The Varyth data, sent before the explosion, had spread worldwide, from Geneva labs to Times Square screens. It exposed the Council's plot, revealing plans to weaponize life traces and the alliance between Lyra and Carver. Governments, for the first time, worked with rogue Varyth, rebels who'd saved Kalen and Jane, to form an interspecies alliance. Carver, hunted after his covert group collapsed, was now a prisoner, but Lyra remained a shadow, an unresolved threat. Jane knew it, and Kalen did too, but today, they allowed themselves hope. A low rumble sounded, and they turned to the landing pad. A new ship gleamed in the sunlight, a hybrid of Varyth and Earth tech, a symbol of the new alliance. It was their first joint mission, to investigate a strange signal from the solar system's edge, perhaps a warning or an invitation from another civilization. Jane smirked, her eyes alight like a warrior's. Ready to be a space hero, Kalen? She teased. Kalen smiled, truly free for the first time, unburdened by his old mission. Not sure about hero, he said, eyes glinting. But I'm ready to go with you. Jane laughed, pulling him toward the ship. They boarded, the cockpit's glass reflecting the stars, a reminder of what they'd overcome. As the ship lifted off, engines roaring, Jane sat beside Kalen, her gaze flicking over the controls. Welcome to Earth, Kalen, she whispered, voice soft but strong. It's messy, but worth fighting for. Kalen looked at her, his dual heart beating steady, no longer adrift. I know, Jane, he replied, voice low, eyes bright. I know. The ship soared into space, piercing the atmosphere, stars ahead like new lights guiding them. Earth shrank behind, but their message, of courage, unity, and unyielding spirit, burned bright, echoing across frequencies, from crowded cities to the universe's farthest reaches. Under the stars, the Earth-Varyth alliance was just beginning, but Jane and Kalen knew they'd laid the foundation for a greater future. Lyra might return, and new threats could arise, but they weren't afraid. They'd face the dark, and they'd keep going, two lights that never fade, leading those who dared to dream among the stars.